Okay, so here's my thing, which was so the example, someone asked me to meet me at a certain time or location, and I know what that means. So I know where to go to meet them. I know what time that is. I understand what they're referring, what specific thing in reality they're referring to. I ask a friend if they want to meet me on Thursday. They say yes, and they know without me saying it that they'll meet at my place. They understand. They already understand where it is we'll meet. I have a physical ailment, and through medical testing, know the cause. So I understand what is the cause of the physical ailment. I wish to attain a certain goal at work, and I know the steps that I need to take to achieve that goal. That's also an understanding. I understand what is required. And then I got near relatives. I actually really struggled with near relatives because what happens is when I start trying to clarify term, I realize like I don't really know what I'm differentiating this from. Like I can describe the characteristics of it, but not in this, less so in this case, but it was still felt somewhat vague. So same things, a certain goal, and I know part of the steps. I have a physical ailment and go through testing, but do not know the cause, so I don't understand the cause. I read a book and can repeat certain quotes or sections, but cannot relate them to real life or practice. What includes all of these? I just came up with three: degree of knowledge, extent of knowledge, quantity of knowledge.
Well, I wouldn't call those a genus. I mean, those are measurements, yes, but
Uh,
the genus is like, what is the wider category?
yeah, that's what I really, I struggle with the near relatives then, and then finding a
We could
way to,
just, yeah. I mean,
I,
another way of thinking that, what's the concept that, what is understanding a type of, or what is it a member of, or what is it a characteristic of? So in this case, you probably just ask what is it a type of?
well, that's what I was trying to
Yeah.
work out. I don't know. And that's why I went to near relatives. I didn't even know how to get to near, I didn't have any sort of solid direction in terms of finding near relatives from, like, do you know, with fruit, it's obvious I'm differentiating fruit from other vegetables or other food products. Um, but with this, it's like I don't know immediately what exactly it's so weird that I can have all these concepts and I don't even know what, like I know roughly what it is, but I don't know what I'm differentiating it from. Anyway, that's the best I got. Degree of knowledge, and then I did complete, validated, and integrate knowledge in the relevant context, or to the extent to which the knowledge is complete. Package into the clear, concise economic sense. And understanding is a kind of measurement of the extent of your validated and integrated knowledge on a given subject in a given context. It's a total mouthful, but that's the best I got. Um,
Let's see. Complete
yeah,
validation to the relevant context or the
but
extent of which the knowledge is. Okay. So, well, this seems a bit. Well, one, we need the genus more particular to really say. I think like that's not a type or a category of something.
a
I
degree
mean,
of isn't it? That's an attribute of something, right? But
yeah. Well, I'm trying to think. When you think of a genus, you just have to think, what is it a subcategory of, or what's the broader category of it? That's what it means to be a genus.
but that's if I
The
already
general thing.
that's if I already know. But if I'm trying to, I'm supposed to find the near relatives first, right? Like, what am I differentiating understanding from that then leads, like, what wider category is
Well,
it in
yeah,
that I'm differentiating from? And I don't know.
right.
Like, and there are so many concepts I was doing, like I told you earlier this morning. I don't know what I'm differentiating from. I know like some associations I have with it, but anyway, that's what I got.
I think it'd
So
be a
you
matter of
don't think
thinking
this is
about
a
the.
genus?
No, you didn't really identify it as a genus here. Like those are relevant measures to figure it out because this is
But
the things we're dealing with. So at least you got the measurements we need.
but
I
isn't
think that's relevant.
isn't this as a concept, doesn't it explain all of these?
I guess that could work. I guess we had to pick one. You shouldn't pick multiple if you're gonna
Well,
try
because
to
I
find
didn't
the
know.
genus.
They're all the same. I didn't know degree,
Yeah.
extent, quantity. I had no idea.
Let's see. So, I mean, I guess, yeah, I guess you could say just degree of knowledge. Is there a word for that that we use that you can think of? Right, in your
I don't.
opinion, even
No, I don't
like,
know. I have no
I
idea.
guess, or you could call like whatever that is. This would be the wider category that say degree of knowledge. You have to think what are other things that might indicate
Well, a
degree of knowledge.
measurement would be wider than degree of knowledge.
Yeah. So what's the particular measurement in this case? Like when you go to the differentia, what differentiates this concept from others? Well, we have to see what differentiates the examples from the near relatives. Like in terms of degree of knowledge or something degree of knowledge plus another characteristic. You can do it either way.
I
So
just
your
did.
near relatives.
I did this for what differentiates it, but
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I mean, that seems valid. Complete and valid in the relevant context. Blah, blah, blah. I don't think that's wrong. Sounds okay. If that's the way you're going to define it. I mean, of course, we can get into discussions about whether this really is the best word, but insofar as this is how you're defining it and logically you're saying it out, you've clarified in your mind what you mean when you say this, and this is valid. I might disagree on what terms you use, but insofar as this is for you and your thinking and your context of knowledge, I think it's appropriate. But you're right, you're comparing it with other things as well. You might want to get better or practice with identifying near relatives. What are you comparing it to? So you're right about your examples. This is what you mean when you say understanding. But when you say something is almost understanding or seems like understanding but isn't, you just try to think of examples. Like you're saying physical ailment go through testing, but you don't know the cause. I mean, that's like uncertainty or something like that. And you're saying even like,
Right.
well,
So that's
uncertainty is
not
not.
not. But you could say I don't understand the cause, couldn't you? I see. I'm confused even in the wording of the near relatives. Like in terms of like, I had a lot of trouble with that when I did risk before, as well. Like the wording of what am I actually referring to? You see, you're saying that's uncertainty. I was like, well, yeah, it is uncertainty, but it's also this is why it's so important to have the concepts clarified because I don't know.
Yes. A lot of that is kind of what do you mean when you say it? Like when you say not knowing, what does that mean? I mean, are you saying does it have to do with the degree of knowledge? Are you saying is there a degree of knowledge there? If that's the genus degree of knowledge, then there is a degree of knowledge to that.
Okay.
So what degree of knowledge are you saying is that but as compared to understanding? Is there a difference when you say it? You say I don't know the cause versus I understand the cause. What's the degree of what measurement in particular about degree of knowledge differentiates them?
I have no idea.
Yeah, and if you don't know, then you could just say, well, they're synonyms, maybe you could say, and that they aren't in fact different, and they're actually examples of the same thing. But these do clearly seem to be quite different. So we are specifying something about it. Couldn't you say that one is more degree of knowledge than the other? Isn't
Oh,
that
okay.
sufficient?
Yeah, there is more knowledge. Yes, there's knowledge of the cause, and you understand the cause.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about knowledge of causes and understanding of causes, but that doesn't seem like an essential characteristic here. It's just a thing you could ask, and that's fine. But I think you're right to say that we're just distinguishing the degree of knowing, the degree of knowledge. Like one's higher, one's lower,
Right.
and you just need to know which one's lower, which one's higher. That's what you're trying to
Right.
do.
Right.
I mean, then of course we can go into further like what is knowledge, and we can go into that concept if you felt unclear about it. But if you feel good about knowledge, at least somewhat, or if it's just a stable concept, then you don't need to go back to that. It's
Well,
about you're deliberating about this right now. We're focusing on understanding. We don't need to get into all these what ifs yet because we're deliberating about the concept understanding. We don't need to question other knowledge when we're really just focusing on what is understanding. That's what
Well,
we're.
I could tell you, for example, what I often find is if I'm thinking about a concept, I can recite certain characteristics or things that it makes me think of, but I couldn't necessarily tell you what its near relatives are in terms of like, oh, this is the process I went through to differentiate this from other similar things. Like I haven't done that. Like I can just recite, for example, risk. uh I remembered like it's the possibility of a bad outcome, but that was like, I don't know what that was differentiated from. I don't know what, but that's just that's, I don't know if that's a really, it's the same with knowledge and a lot of other concepts. Like it's just a kind of risk is that thing you think about when it's that kind of form of retaining the idea rather
Right.
than like, you know, this compact, here's the genus, this is what I differentiated from, this is the process I went through. Like, I don't have any of that. So I don't know. But
I mean,
that's why I sort of try to guess, but I wouldn't say I don't have the concept because it doesn't make sense because
right,
there's still something there, right? Like I'm able to tell you some
right.
characteristics about it that are true, but there is also something that's not clear in terms of near relatives. So
Yeah, I mean, we
yeah,
could say
this,
we're reorganizing rather than creating concepts here. We're doing integration in a sense. We're integrating other knowledge we may have acquired or learned or whatever it might be. That's what we're doing here. It almost doesn't matter how you got here. It's just you are here right now. So you clarify as you
um,
can. You make those connections and then
yeah.
it gets strengthened.
Although it does seem strange that if you do have it, then you don't know the like you really struggle to find what near relatives actually are. That it's just strange going through that process. But
Hmm.
so do you agree that these are near relatives, or you don't think they are?
Near is a very subjective term there. And I feel
Yeah,
like
you're right.
I'm not even worried about the word near. I'm just saying, um, you can almost just say they're similar relatives, or even they. I mean, you can almost say they are near together in a way. Like what what they make you think of the other. Like you're. I mean, how do I say this? A near relative is, well, in a way, it is going to be subjective because all you're doing is pointing out things. You're saying one thing is understanding, the other one isn't. I guess it's kind of partly a matter of creativity. Like, how good are you at sorting through your concepts to find one that's nearby? Like, you could say frogs are near
Right.
toads because there's some conceptual similarity. It doesn't matter if you know why it is similar or not, but you could say those concepts are near each other. Or you could
Right.
say that rain is near snow.
Because they share characteristics.
Yeah, at least implicitly and or at that perceptual level. You might not know exactly how to articulate it, but
Yeah.
conceptually they're still organized in your mind. You know something, you do understand something, and your concepts are organized. So I think you can trust sometimes that you can say there's a nearby concept, and usually people can understand what that would mean. Like nearby, like what's near frog, a toad would make sense, or what's near banana, you got apple, things like that.
Well,
That's
then
how
I
I
could
think of
add,
it usually.
but then I would you say then it's strange. I guess I was thrown off by near relatives because if I'm looking for something that's not understanding, I think of like being in China and listening to people talk in some southern dialect, and I'm like, that's not understanding.
Well, I think even in this, you should use the obvious ones too. And I almost feel better saying use some clear, obvious. Like it can almost call that an irrelative. So it really doesn't matter. I think you could say that's nearby understanding. Like, I mean, maybe it is understanding, maybe it isn't. Or
But
I mean, it's how you distinguish it. Like,
I guess I went wrong with because if I think like it can't be totally different, like it can't be, I
right?
can't just put a banana peel on the floor. That has nothing to do with anything.
I
But
know.
it's
Yeah,
it's different. It's different from understanding, right? Like that's not understanding. There's just a banana peel on the floor.
they're
So,
almost
but
incommensurable. they're incommensurable. That's
Right.
really what that is. Like,
But
how do you compare them? You don't.
I think that's where I got stuck, because it's like when I think different, I just think something that completely has no connection. And then
Yeah,
when I think near relative, I think something so close that it doesn't give enough. I don't know. It's still, but now
yeah,
that I think about it, it seems like there's something similar about listening. I guess yeah, I guess you have to be really specific, because it's like you listen to people talking and they are speaking a language, but you do not understand. If you spell it all out, then maybe. But
yeah. I think
um,
that's a good like counterexample, or a good relative, so to speak. Like, I think that's a good one to compare it to. Like, going to China and not understanding Chinese. What does that mean to not understand the language? It seems like there's some difference between understanding a language versus knowing the word somebody says but not being able to piece it together. So we could maybe distinguish between language if you wanted to do that, if that was important or really critical. I mean, sure, like you could say you're not knowing because um, you can't evaluate anything, so you can't even think about it, or
right.
like you can't know what it means because it's like just like put together random words in English. It might be grammatically correct and it might sound grammatical, but it still doesn't make sense. You don't know what it means. You don't know how to evaluate it. In fact, you don't even understand it.
But
But
then in
go
that
ahead.
example, like, is understanding even applicable? That's why I'm clarifying this, because it's like, does the term even apply in a situation where you just hear sounds? Is, like,
Um,
randomly arranged letters, randomly arranged English words, like, is the term even applicable in that context? That's why I was like trying to, with the near relatives, I was trying to, yeah, that's why I kind of did these near relatives, which are not like that obvious one, like language. I don't know. I don't have an answer to that, but that's why I wanted to.
yeah, I mean that you can make further distinctions with that, or you might say that sometimes if things are too similar, you don't want to have sub concepts of understanding. It does get a little bit weird, but I guess it really comes down to how you try to differentiate it. Maybe you've identified two concepts that you have two concepts, but you happen to use the same word. You can use the same word for two different concepts, like as in like they're referring to completely different things.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
or you could have the same multiple words for the same concept. You could have dog or perro, as in Spanish for dog, and they refer to the same thing. They're the same concept.
right.
Um, I think you had the right idea here. It's just about how integrated do you need it to be. Do you? I mean, it could be fine to say you go somewhere you don't understand a language, it can still qualify under here as well, not understanding. It's just the opposite, or that understanding a language is a type of understanding, and that's
Yeah.
fine.
The examples matter, because then in that case, let's say we just had those examples of language. We're dealing with conceptual, um, con- we're dealing with conceptual knowledge. That's
Yeah.
where the term is applicable. So in the case of randomly arranged English words, understanding wouldn't be applicable. You wouldn't even say
Okay.
you don't
Sure.
understand or under. But that's what I mean. Like, the examples seem to be important in determining.
Yeah. Yeah. We might
Yeah.
not use degree of knowledge for that case because degree of knowledge doesn't seem to really identify any difference between these things. Because you're telling me yourself that you see a difference between these two things. You just want to articulate it better in a sense, right?
Which two things? Difference between?
Like understanding a language versus understanding a piece of knowledge.
Um, no. I'm saying that if we put in, like, the examples that we use and the near relatives we use are very important in then defining what it's actually referring to. Because if you think about it, like the example you gave with the randomly arranged English words, like, if I have one example is I speak a language and understand what someone is saying, they tell me to pick up a pen, I pick up a pen or whatever, and then some stupid example like that. And then I go to China and I hear them speak some Cantonese dialect, and I don't understand. Like if those are the only two examples, then the idea of not like you wouldn't say I don't understand this randomly arranged sentence, because then you would have to say the fan is whirring, the fan on my roof is making a noise, I don't understand the noise, which wouldn't, you know what I'm saying? So the examples we put in matter.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. The examples matter. I was just trying to say that we might just change the genus then from what we had. If it's not working, we have to change the genus. Like that might not be quite the genus. Like degree of knowledge seems relevant,
Right.
but it might not be the way we want to integrate it because it's not working. Like we started out was fine. Your what you had was fine for the way you put it out. Now, if you
Yeah.
introduce this other idea, well, yeah, we probably need to reorganize it now because you gave a new example and almost new evidence and new information you want to integrate into your knowledge. You want to integrate it with the rest because you probably understood fine what it meant to understand the language, but now it seems like, oh, you want to integrate that in. How does that affect understanding? Like, how does it affect when differentiating these kind of, or what about it you're asking yourself, like, what about this do I need to know? What about this? How can I put this into what I know in a very clear way? So we might need to reorganize some things once you do that.
Yeah. I well the genus I would, I guess if I think in terms of language, then I'm like, well, knowledge would be the genus of not understanding some people speaking, and then understanding, not the genus, sorry, the concept which includes all the examples. That is the genus. But let's say we have the one case of someone understanding a language and one case of someone not understanding a language. Like the concept that unites both, in my mind, is like, um, actually, I don't know. Yeah, I'm not sure now.
Yeah, it's not,
I need to.
degree of knowledge doesn't seem to be it. I mean, it's relevant,
Oh,
but it's not, maybe not critical. Um, like
it's something
almost like
about whether.
comprehension. Could comprehension be more general than understanding?
Um, I think comprehend is a same synonym, because I remember looking it up or something, and I looked up the. I'll see if I can find the. Yeah, I don't see a difference. I'm struggling as is with just understanding. So
I Well, maybe I could show you mine now because I think we have
yeah, let's
understanding.
go. Let's look at
I'll go
yours.
to
Do you want to
let me
share? I'll stop share, and then you can share just one window. You don't have to share the whole.
yeah, let me just close some other boxes anyway, just in case. Okay. How do I do this?
I just hope this gets quicker as I do more and more. There's no way. There's no way I can do this.
Yeah,
There's
I mean,
just
at some
no way.
point, I know what you mean. It could be enticing. Just keep going and going. The unfortunate thing is, like, you just stop sometimes. You make progress, you notice, and sometimes you just accept that you made some progress and didn't solve the answer.
But I can see how if this becomes easy and you're constantly doing it day to day, then there would be pleasure in it, and it would be really quick, and you'd have like a really sharp perception of everything. But if you're not like doing it by default, it's just ridiculous. This is it's just
Share screen.
ridiculous to do it.
Where is the? Oh, here it is. Yeah, I mean, I can do it quickly with smaller things, but like when I'm trying to figure out something new, yeah, it could take hours to really go through this. Like I'm really theorizing, really thinking deep. Like there's so much I'm going through because it's such a. Where's the click? Where do I click?
So if you go at the bottom, there's a share screen. It should be a little a share screen will pop up a dialog, and then it'll let you pick the window in basic. It'll let you select it. Okay, and I'm recording as well. All right,
Okay.
so
So
yes.
forget everything about belief. The other rest
Okay.
is mostly for me. So we got understand here at the
Yeah.
bottom. So I really didn't do it Binswanger's way, maybe because I'm good at coming up with examples in my head without writing it down. But so understanding, I just thought of like understanding concepts, understand, or not. I shouldn't use the word. I just say examples like when I talk about a piece of knowledge, I usually imply like a degree of knowing, a degree of recognizing the facts about the matter, like understand, or when I say I understand the cause of illness, I understand the um, like I understand that the the ground is wet because it rained. I mean, I can consider that like a basic understanding. It's not a strong understanding. Like when I say I understand how quantum mechanics works, like I mean, I usually use the term when something is less certain. Like I could think of, like I could say I know what quantum physics is, or I know what quantum entanglement is. I mean, that would be a further. That's a different, like a near relative almost.
And are
The
you
thing I'm
saying?
referring, like when that
Sorry,
feeling when
continue.
I'm like that feeling when you're like, it makes sense. That's usually what I'm referring to when I say understand knowing. I usually say that when I refer to like I've understand really well. I've gotten a lot more knowledge about it. I've put a lot more information in there. So really what I was thinking of was distinguishing them in terms of degree of knowledge is the way I was doing it there.
So
And I was
understanding
saying
is degree of knowledge.
that's the way I was considering at the time. That's the CCD here. That's the general characteristic of the things I'm distinguishing from. I'm using
So
the degree
then,
of knowledge.
what is understanding? What do we like when we're coming up with the concept understanding? What is it we are different? What is the wider category from which we're differentiating it?
I put in grasp because you can grasp all. When you say you grasp, I think you're always understanding. You understand. If you know you grasp something, you understand you grasp something. If you
But what
comprehend, you grasp
what?
something.
But then okay, let like so okay. Understanding is from what I got from what you were saying. It's um, understanding is this is tricky, but it refers to. I'll just go with this description because I got nothing else. It refers to whether or not you. Oh, I don't want to use know, but it's your knowledge of. Do you know what things in reality this specific thing refers to? That's something like that. That's what understanding is,
I
right?
should I should say that knowing is a type of understanding. I should have put grasp, understand, then know beneath that. And I think comprehend is the same as grasp. So I mean, I've just rearranged it there. I recognize that. But I mean, this is a process I go through when I do it. I rearrange it a little bit when I see that. And I think that makes things clear when I put knowing under beneath understanding that knowing is just a narrower understanding.
But
Um,
can you? All right, I'm confused here because you're saying grasp is the wider category, right?
mhm.
But then, can you think of an example where you grasp something but don't understand it?
Yeah, like when you grasp that, you can grasp like I'm using it more like as an implicit thing. Grasping is having a sense of a vague recognition, but not any cognitive way to spell it out and say it. So I could say that its degree of clarity, like clarity could be a measurement here, or intensity, say, or clarity I like here. So I'm distinguishing on clarity. Certain things are more clear or not. There's a range of clarity, and I could put no under understanding that would make more sense. So knowing is a type of understanding, and understanding is a type of grasping, and I could arrange
Knowing
it
is
that way.
knowing is a type of understanding.
and understanding is a type of grasping.
What about knowledge?
Knowledge I consider something else entirely. That's why I changed it. Here I started changing other things because I felt like I needed to start rearranging a bit other things on the way up once I did that.
Oh, I can see
It,
knowledge up there. Yeah. Okay.
yeah, and comprehend I might actually stick that into grasp. Or maybe I could call that a type of grasping, or maybe I should. Um, yeah, I would say comprehension is a type of grasping. Now that I put it here, like what you're saying about language, like you can comprehend a language, but that's not what I mean when I'm saying understanding.
So
But you're
let's
grasping
ignore
for it.
comprehending because it's let's go with
Okay.
just so
Mhm.
grasp. So how are you getting to understanding? Like, how do you come up with this concept? Like, in what context do you notice there is this thing called understanding, and there's this other thing from which I am differentiating it? What and but it's similar thing.
Yeah. What did I use? I mean, I
Because
guess I
I'm
did. So I'm
yeah.
trying to really retrace how I did this because when I do this, I do take for granted a little bit that understanding is at least valid. So I don't really get into always about what are the referents. See, when I start clarifying, I start pointing out to my referents. And I can say understanding. I see, like I just did. I used that language example when I say that I'm referring to times when I say I don't understand what you said to a person I don't speak the language to, versus I don't understand when I meant that I heard every word you said. I just can't integrate it into my knowledge. I mean, those are the things I'm referring to. I just kind of go to that immediately. Like I was saying, when I say I do understand, what I don't understand, and when I might say I
And
use
so
the
if
word.
you don't understand, is that a grasp? But that's not a grasp though, right? So how does that how
Or I
does
would
that
say
then
I would then just convert to like to understand what somebody says is different. To understand Chinese is different than to say I understand that proposition you made, or I understand the words you said is different than I understand the logical implications you're discussing. Like they're a different kind of grasping. Like they're both grasping something, but one is grasping just how do you piece together words, versus the other is grasping really is grasping the semantics,
so what
right, or the
differentiates
syntax.
so what differentiates understanding then? If you can also say you grasp the words or you grasp the proposition or you grasp the implication of the proposition, like what would be the difference between that and I understand the
Okay.
proposition, I understand the words, I understand the implication of
Um,
the
maybe complexity. I know this might get really because my context of knowledge is different than yours, so I might be distinguishing this a bit different than you would. When what I'm saying here depends on a lot of what I know about linguistics, which might be more than yours in different contexts of knowledge. It's not going to invalidate what you're thinking of. It's just these are finer distinctions which might not serve any purpose for you and which actually might not actually improve the organization of your concepts. What I'm doing is using something like complexity. I'm saying I'm using syntax versus semantics. Semantics being, can I even understand what the words mean at all? What do they refer to? And syntax being how the arrangement of the words and their logical implications. You could think of it that way. That's how I'm differentiating them, which probably is much narrower way of measuring it than you would even need. And you might not even, you might just say it's
okay.
just another category
But then
because there's,
if
yeah,
we step back though, where I still am not sure where understanding is, like relative to like where how do you I still don't really get how you know, like just like with the example of the fruit, right? We come up with
yeah,
we integrate banana, apple, and orange into fruit when we observe that there are vegetables that don't taste sweet and there are other food products. And so what is like in this case, how do we get to understanding to go, okay, there's this thing called understanding. Like you could probably merge some more complicated concepts that you're using and just go with understanding. And then so what I still don't get what understanding, like what we differentiated it from to and the wider category from which we differentiate it to get it, basically. Wait,
I mean,
differentiated, integrated, like what specific things are we integrating, and those things that we're integrating, what do they have in common with every other observation relative to that? I don't know if that made any sense, but just like, just like we're looking at apple, banana, orange, right? We're saying, okay, they grow on trees and they're sweet, and so that differentiates them from vegetables.
yes.
But they're similar. They're still, vegetables grow on plants or whatever, and so there's that in common. And they're perishable or whatever, but the difference is that the fruit are sweet, and so that's why we create that category. But I'm confused as to, like, with understanding, but even with mine, I'm confused, like, what observations did we make to go, oh, okay, here is this wider category, and there's within that wider category there's a thing called understanding. That's what I don't get. Even with your example, like, I don't get it.
Well, all I'm doing is finding the measurement in common among the things I'm distinguishing. Like clarity is one. Wait, you forget what I said about complexity. I mean, clarity is sufficient, I think. And a certain degree of clarity.
I guess it's also tricky because you could probably use the words to refer to different concepts. So if you're talking about clarity as a measurement, you could also talk about understanding as a measurement, like
It
level
could
of understanding or whatever.
sometimes maybe could even reverse it. Sometimes I don't think it's necessarily wrong to switch them up and to make it function logically. Because I mean, words don't just merely mean what they are in the dictionary. A lot of it is to do with the content you have in your mind and your context of knowledge. You could say, "Oh, I misdefined it" or something according to the standard English or to the
Yeah.
OED. But the way you organize your concepts are valid insofar as just as this is how you define them and organize them. When you say understanding, you're referring to something particular in your mind, and that's why it's gonna be hard to do this with other people because what is always an example in one person's mind can't necessarily be conveyed in the other person's mind. But we can talk about it and discuss it, but I can't exactly say all your context and knowledge and then tell you how to do it other than here we've gone through some exercises that I think the way you've done it is valid. It might look different than mine, but I don't think it's invalidated anything just because we've done it differently. The concepts still refer to the same thing. We're just trying to integrate it with everything that we
So,
individually know.
but in your case, look, I don't think I got to the genus with any confidence. So it's not like, you know, but I don't understand. So in your case, are you saying, because it would apply to mine too, right? Like broadly should apply to mine too. So are you saying understanding is a kind of clarity? Is that what you were saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Or
And
a
then, so
measurement of clarity.
measurement of clarity. And what is clarity?
Clarity is grasping. It's those um, more
So,
vague sense
okay. So
of
clarity and grasp is the same, right? Just so I know what you're referring to. So understanding is
clarity
a kind of,
is not just, I mean, it's a measurement it's a CCD. It's a measurement that's present in grasping. That is really important. I think there's an additional characteristic, which would be um, well, I'm not saying that clarity is the same as grasping. It's just a measurement of grasping. Because I mean,
okay.
grasping is a lot of other things too. It's not
Okay.
just clarity.
Can
I mean,
you,
you could use clarity elsewhere. Clarity might have to do with different concepts, but the measurement itself I'm using is clarity. In the same way, when you're forming if you're forming the concept table, you don't need to know anything about shapes. It's furniture is not the concept shape, obviously. It uses shape and needs shape. What is not a shape?
so,
It's a different concept.
um, okay, can you give me some examples of grasping,
Grasping.
of different levels of
When
clarity as well, if
okay,
you can
I'm
think of?
thinking. Oh, I can think of a simple example like well, one example, like a child grasps at a ball rolls. It's not really understanding why it rolls or anything. It's just you're just seeing it roll, and that's just a mere perceptual thing.
So it's
It's still kind of
identification.
vague. Yeah, I mean, it would be a type of identification, indeed, for sure.
So identification of perceptual data
Or
is,
of information, just identification of information
okay,
could
so
be
that's one
enough.
example. And
Yeah,
then,
or
but
you
the
could have,
clarity, but I didn't get that bit about clarity. You're saying, so but he is perceiving, at least he's perceiving that clearly, right? Because he knows the ball is rolling. What else is there to be clear about?
yeah, we could say that there's certain types of clarity, like clarity of perceptual content, clarity of cognitive content, clarity of emotional content. I mean, those are distinctions we can have of clarity, of different types of clarity, not necessarily degrees, but types. So you could have like conceptual understanding, perceptual understanding, emotional understanding. We could have each of those as a separate little box. And from there, I could then distinguish degrees of clarity for cognitive content, which could be like, oh, I know a few facts of what you said, but there's still a lot more I need to integrate versus I've integrated a lot and make it consistent with a vast sum of my knowledge is a would be a high degree of understanding or high clarity too, I would argue. I
Could
mean, I
you,
consider that more clear and more clear when you've integrated more information, clarity increases. So that's why
so,
I use clarity.
so clarity is a characteristic grasp, right?
Yes, it's a characteristic that we use to distinguish also the subconcepts.
Can you give me an example though of a time you grasp where you don't grasp clearly?
When well, the times when I say I kind of know, which is usually when I've done like an associative thing, like I can make a metaphor, I can relate it to the way that you build Legos, but I can't relate it to the reality. In fact, like somebody could tell me about set theory and math, like, oh, it made me think of Legos, but I still don't. That's just a metaphor. I'm not. It's still vague to me what you mean. Or when somebody says, um, like when they use sarcasm, I just like, well, I don't know what you mean. It's kind of like a vagueness there. Like I could know what the sentence means in both interpretations, but I don't know which one. So it's maybe more clear than when I say I have no idea what uh, how set theory works. I think it's still a little more clear than that.
What
There's
about with perceptual? Can you think of an example where you perceive not clearly perceptually? Like, does it? I don't know. I'm just trying to think. Would it, like,
needing
if you're,
glasses, something as simple as that. Just needing glasses, or um, when something's far away, it's
yeah,
less clear. I mean,
right.
that one's obviously easy because it's not conceptual. It's perceptual is usually easier to do because it's just like, oh, like when you squint your eyes. I mean, that's when I say something's unclear, or when something's clear is when there's nothing in the way of my face or things like that, or my eyes aren't watering, or it's not dusty outside.
So then, understanding is when you is a is it a measurement of the clarity of grasping conceptual knowledge? Is that where you're? Is that what you're?
Yes, that would
Okay.
be a good definition.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean,
Uh,
I think that is better than what I started with. Even now that I've talked about it, like, yeah, I think that actually makes more sense than what I did. Now that I've distinguished types of grasping,
and
like that,
what
I think that helped me clarify what I am actually saying.
and what is the what would be what exactly is clarity of conceptual knowledge measuring? Like, what is that? How do you determine if you're clear or not on conceptual knowledge?
Um, well, what is the clarity? It's that sense of vagueness versus when it's less vague. Just that I can't be more specific than that sense. I mean, maybe I could say the sense is not specific enough, but it actually that seems a valid enough measurement. The measurement itself isn't invalid, and I've had no reason to alter it either because it
But
actually keeps working.
if you see a mirage, are you perceiving unclearly?
Um, Depends. I would argue that no, you're not seeing that. Literally, the vision itself is unclear, and that's obviously a very deep philosophical question. When you get, that's just like my class about hallucinations and things. Like, what is the nature of the content that you're looking at? Which is, how do you even? That's really difficult. You would
Well, I
almost want to
mean,
put that in a new category, like
because that
imagine.
well that brings me to this idea of if you need glasses or if if you see smoke, that does that mean the grasping is unclear, like by that measurement?
No,
Because
I
if
should say that the perceptual grasping would be clear.
so, it's
I
always
mean, what?
clear.
Well, depending on the quality of your eyes or whatever. Like, I mean, you'll always see something, but whether it's clear or not is a different story. But say it was perfectly clear, like a bent water in the glass, like that's literally what it looks like. The
But if there
mirage
was
is often
smoke
that.
in, what if there was smoke in front of your eyes and you couldn't see? Is that
Then you
clear?
would say it's just less clear. I'm going to use another concept and just say it's unclear. I mean, I wouldn't use a fancy concept, just like the clarity is so low that I say it's unclear. That's like absent practically.
uh, yeah, I'm just trying to work out, like, so because I'm thinking about this, like, what happens if if your concept of clarity is not applicable to, I don't know, like, if you do have glasses, is I don't know if it's necessarily valid going by this objectivist view that concepts are based on perceptions and perceptions are non-volitional. I'm not sure how it works with what you say, like if it's clear or not. Like if you have bad, if you bad eyesight or if there's smoke in the way, like that's there in reality, just like a mirage is. And then so if it's not valid to say that clarity is the term clarity as a measurement is applicable to set perceptual data, then what does that mean for the concept grasp? Like how can you have a measurement applicable to one thing within grasp but not other things within grasp?
But it is, I'm saying it is applicable to all of them. Clarity is
Right.
applicable to every single one. I mean, I could say there's kinds of clarity. I mean, there are kinds of ways of the content. You can recognize what it is clearly. You can recognize without hesitation or recognize without needing to pause and reflect or pause and wait for it to be determined or something like that. Like a mirage is the same thing as a bent stick in water. Like you can have the vision itself be very clear, but then you can say it's conceptually unclear, that I can't really figure out what it is. I know what I see clearly. My eyes are fine, but my understanding is completely off. And we might say there's many reasons for that, but either way, their clarity. I mean, they could have this. They could have all identical measures of clarity, but they're differentiated on the mental content. As in, is it a percept? Is it a concept? Or is it something else?
Yeah, I just mean that I'm just trying to get my head around, like, you know, perceptual, like that when you're saying perceptual clarity, you're not referring to the same thing as when you're saying conceptual clarity. Like you couldn't be measuring the same thing. And so it's not the same concept. If you're not measuring the same thing, is clarity, perceptual clarity the same thing as
Yeah, and this is why I went up to the other stuff here. That's why I started going up, because for my studies of memory, that's a very important question. So then I started going up to, and I did figure out yesterday some things, and this isn't even my final draft. Like I've changed it since I wrote it. I kept the bottom, so what we've been talking about hasn't been changed, and that was actually well, as you saw, that's my thinking process, and I changed what I had as I went. I mean, I'll go back to this later and change what I have here because of our discussion. But I mean, that's my thinking process. What we've gone through, this is what I do. And it does work well. It's what I've done in science thinking too. And it can seem tedious, but when you think more and more about it, then it's like almost like automatic at some point. Like I've thought about that kind of like memory so much. It's like now it's just like I barely need to even think about it to distinguish it because it consumes so much of my thinking time. I mean, that's why I wrote a thesis in it because I thought a lot about it. And yeah,
Yeah.
it can be really complicated. but I think the important point here is that we haven't invalidated anything here, but the more we talk about it, the better we integrate. And we might realize, oh, we need these concepts. Or like, I might not need to integrate this all the way up to, I don't know, like language comprehension. I might need to not work that out, but at least I'm making the distinctions. Like, there's perceptual content, conceptual content. I'm saying you got a clarity about all those things. Well, the difficult part you're saying is like, oh, there's mental objects. Well, yeah, I think you could have like a separate chart almost that links together like in some like in a 3 dimensions almost. Like it links like to the side, and like that's all I can say about it. Like they're connected and they are related, but they're not in the same hierarchy. Like mental objects are characteristics of grasping and belief in what I have there, or but they aren't types of belief. I mean, clearly, understanding a proposition that you make, like understanding quantum mechanics, whatever that means. I mean, you know, you're referring to conceptual content, but understanding isn't a type of concept. I mean, like the actual referent is not a type of concept, and mental objects don't distinguish forms of understanding, but they're all relevant there. So you could say they're like tangential concepts or something like that, or what you said, dependent concepts, which we would need a whole different. We can't just use a tree like this to do that. Like, it doesn't do the job. Like, you need to be like
I
three
think
dimensional.
I'm still, to be honest, I'm still 90% confused, but I think you're onto something with like, and I'm just thinking about it now with there being understanding, you differentiate that from, um, it's from like the wider group is actually just broader perceptual observation of things. But I feel like I'm sensing there's something there. I've got to think about more. But that's going from 99% confusion to 90%. And so that 9% is that idea of like, okay, there's something about the perceptual, you're differentiating it from like grasping perceptual information. Because there's, just like you differentiate concepts and percepts, you differentiate perceptual grasp versus conceptual grasp, which understanding is something about that. That's all I mean, that's actually a big direction, but that's what I got. It's still confusing as hell. And I hope to God that as I integrate more and more, like this won't be like this pulling the hairs out that I don't have.